Alright, welcome back to the series that I for some reason decided to call the Commander's Kitchen, because we're back here with another Oathbreaker deck tech. And this one is awful. We're talking about Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, and his signature spell, Sunder. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge is 4 blue and a black for a 5 loyalty planeswalker with an excellent passive. Creature and planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. His +2 ability is what's known as our win con, reading Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge deals X damage to each opponent where X is the number of artifacts you control, you gain X life. -3 really doesn't matter. Return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. We won't do that. And then -8 can sometimes be fun. Exile the top 10 cards of your library, put all artifact cards from among them onto the battlefield. And more importantly, our signature spell, no it's not Thoughtcast, it's Sunder. 3 blue, instant, return all lands to their owner's hands. So, this is going to be an absolutely degenerative control deck where we essentially seek to get enough mana on our board through artifacts and super ramp that we can return all lands to our owner's hand, shut our opponents down, and continue to thrive, mostly +2ing Tezzeret to just kill them with whatever's on our board. Now, normally, I don't really care about the mana base. People know how to build a mana base. It's not that important. I'll leave that up to you. But this time, there are actually quite a few important additions. For one, of course, we're going to be running Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. Because why not? I mean, come on, it's super awesome. And that does, of course, mean that we're going to be running Treasure Map, too, because if you ever draw 2 of these, we're definitely going to go search for the 3rd one, even if it means that we can't cast any of the colored spells in our hand, because assembling Tron and Oathbreaker is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. Another of the colorless lands that we're going to be using is Darksteel Citadel, because it is an artifact, as well as Indestructible. Who doesn't love that? Karn's Bastion is a fun include, because why not? I think once I proliferated, like, 2 things. It was pretty great, but then, more importantly, not more importantly, because first, the other 2 artifact lands that we can run are Volta Whispers and Seat of the Synod, 2 of my favorites. But then, 3 more lands that you probably haven't heard of and probably don't want to run, but I'm going to encourage you anyway, is Peat Bog. It comes into play tapped with 2 depletion counters on it, and you can tap to remove a depletion counter and add 2 black mana to your mana pool. So this land is slow and dumb, it eventually just kills itself, but it is going to give us 2 mana when we tap for it, which can, in certain ways, ramp us when we need to, despite the fact that it's going to come in tapped. Then we also have Crystal Vein, which can just tap for our colorless mana, that's pretty neat, but you can also sacrifice it to add 2 mana. Again, adding 2 mana from 1 land, that's pretty cool, it could just ramp out the artifacts that we need to cast our other stuff. Seems efficient, right? Ebon Stronghold also enters the battlefield tapped and can just tap for a black, or you can sacrifice it to add 2 black, so a little bit of the worst of both. Those are all going to be actually pretty important to just being able to ramp out the artifacts that we want to do. Speaking of those artifacts, we're running an absolutely criminal amount of rocks in this deck, and a lot of weird ones at that. The first one I'm going to talk about is Lotus Bloom. Wait, that's not a rock, but I mean, whatever, it's pretty fun. I only own it recently, and it's cool. But actually, a lot better is Lotus Petal, which we're also going to be running. I'll explain a little bit more later about some of the synergies there. But then, of course, we'll just have, for our 2 mana rocks, Dimir Signet, Mind Stone, Prismatic Lens, Everflowing Chalice, which is sometimes a 4 mana rock, but it's basically a 2 mana rock, and then we've got a couple of 3 mana rocks with Worn Power Stone and my personal favorite 3 mana rock from recent, Midnight Clock, which taps to add a blue, and you can also pay 2 and a blue to put an hour counter on it. And then at the beginning of each upkeep, not just your upkeep, you put an hour counter on it. When the 12th hour counter is put on a Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and your graveyard into your library and then draw 7 cards and exile Midnight Clock. I've done that several times. It's super fun. You get to tell people what hour it is on their upkeep. It doesn't annoy them at all. It's great. For a 4 mana rock, we've got Hedron Archive. Taps for 2, and sometimes you sack it for cards. It's great. Gilded Lotus is our 5 mana rock because it adds 3 of any one color. That one even gives us different colors. Pretty cool. And then Coveted Jewel, which you shouldn't run, but I'm going to anyway because it's super fun. 6 mana for draw 3 and tap for 3. That's pretty cool. I just hope no one would ever take it from you. That'd be awful. So another thing that goes great with all this crazy amount of ramp, knowing that we're going to get rid of our lands, are cost-reducing spells, and we've got a couple good ones. To keep in line with the degenerative control theme, of course, we're running Baral, Chief of Compliance, which makes our instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, including Sunder, of course. That's actually the main one that we're trying to reduce, as well as whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do discard a card, we'll get to those spells later. A super niche pick that I actually really love is Nightscape Familiar, making blue and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, we're not casting red spells, but both Tezzeret and Sunder are a blue spell, so if we get this guy out on turn 2, it's actually going to allow us to pop off significantly sooner. He's a 1/1, and you can also pay 1 and a black to regenerate him. Then, like I said, we're running a lot of artifacts, so Ethereum Sculptor is an excellent include, simply making our artifact spells cost 1 less to cast as a 1/2 Vidalcan Artificer. And then our thickest cost reducer is going to be Ugin the Ineffable. But we're not really running him for the line of text that says colorless spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. It's mostly because his +1 is pretty relevant, turning our top card into a 2/2 that when it dies we get to return to our hand. And his -3 destroying target permanent that's 1 or more colors, that is an excellent ability. But, you know, not to discount his other as well. And then along with all of our cost reducing spells, we're even going to run some cost exaggerating spells like Lodestone Golem with non-artifact spells you cast cost 1 more to cast, to just really piss off those opponents who are just trying to get all their permanents back on the board. It's great. Now, another important part of any control deck is going to be the removal, and we're not actually running that much, but I like all of them quite a bit. The first one we're going to run is obviously the Elder spell. Black, sorcery, destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control, put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. Now, normally this is excellent because it means you can not only wipe out all your opponent's Oathbreakers, but then alt your own, but honestly, I don't even think I've ever done that. Who cares? Next up with our black removal is Bontu's Last Reckoning. It's a sorcery for destroy all creatures lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. This is great because it's so efficiently costed and we're basically just going to screw all our lands anyway, so who cares about the downside? Whelming Wave is super underrated in Oathbreaker. Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Now we're not an idiot, we're not running any of those, but it doesn't matter because no one else is too, so this just bounces all creatures to their hands, which is a pretty nice effect. And then Flood of Tears for 4 blue, return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. If you return 4 or more non-token permanents you control this way, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now this of course does have a significantly poor effect on us, seeing that we're going to have a ton of mana rocks out when we play this, but this is an especially excellent follow-up to any time before or after you're about to sunder to just really make sure that nothing's happening, and not to mention that we're going to get the advantage by putting probably maybe our Gilded Lotus onto the battlefield, maybe tap that to throw down our Worn Power Stone, and there you go, you're off to the races, you're going to rebuild no problem. I mean, those other, you know, your opponents, they probably don't have any plan to do anything like that, so it should be fine. Then, like I mentioned earlier, we are running some counter magic, probably less than we should, but that's okay. One of my favorites is Spell Pierce, definitely a staple of the Oathbreaker format, more on that later, not really. I think most people might be surprised by these two, but Negate and Memory Lapse are 2 of my favorites just because they can be cost reduced into essentially a better Spell Pierce by either Baral or, I don't know, that other one that I was talking about. Not to mention that Memory Lapse is basically just counterspell if you're countering a signature spell, which oftentimes you are, and Negate, of course, works about the same. And then I didn't have a copy of Counterspell, so I thought I'd include Stoic Rebuttal. Metalcraft, it costs 1 blue, and it has Metalcraft. Stoic Rebuttal costs 1 less to cast if you control 3 or more artifacts, counter target spell. It's just Counterspell, but with more work, but you know what? Sue me. I don't always have to run Counterspell in my control deck if I don't want to, right? That's not going to make anybody frustrated. Now, as you know, I like to run as many Oathbreakers as I can in my Oathbreaker decks, other than the one that's actually piloting it. So, of course, we're going to be running Ashiok Dream Render, one of the most useful hate pieces in blue-black for 1 and then hybrid blue-black 5 loyalty planeswalker with spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause their controller to search their library. How hateful, how excellent, and then not to mention that you can also have target player put the top 4 cards of their library into the graveyard and then exile all opponents' graveyards. That hits up more strategies than you would think, especially the other Ashiok Exhume decks, which are always playing against. It's pretty awesome. How neat is that? Alright, the next planeswalker is another absolutely beloved Oathbreaker staple, which is going to be Narset, Parter of Veils. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. That's all she does. Nothing else matters, because we're going to be casting Windfall in that same turn. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards that player discarded this way. Now, I'm not a monster. I would not make a Narset Windfall deck just on its own. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to include it in my other degenerate deck. So that's the plan, basically, is that we're just going to have Narset and Windfall and just draw them both and do it anyway. But you know, if you don't happen to draw Narset, that's okay, because we're in blue-black, and we can also play Notion Thief, which is 2 blue-black for a 3/1 with Flash, and if an opponent would draw a card except the first one he or she draws in each of his or her draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So it's even better, because we're going to draw like 20 cards or something like that. Do the math, it's great. He's also a 3/1, which is kind of cool for just, you know, a little bit more mana than Narset, maybe a couple more colors as well, but that's fine. While we're on this, why don't we talk about the rest of our creatures, which is not very many. Big surprise. Solemn Simulacrum is pretty cool. Sad robot, 2/2 for 4, but when he enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. And of course, when he dies, you get to draw a card, which is great. We're also going to be running Soul of New Phyrexia. I'm back and forth on this include because it's a 6-mana 6/6 with trample, and we're not really trying to do that, but I mean, it's an artifact anyway, and then also has this cool ability where we can pay 5 to give permanents I control indestructible until end of turn. I personally very rarely played this card in a game, and definitely not activated the ability, but whatever, I still think it's a good include. Maybe give it a try. You know, you gotta run some creatures, them's the rules. I don't make them, I just obey them. The last creature I'm going to talk about right here is Emry, Lurker of the Loch. This one is super great because it's secretly just a 3-mana rock, just like the Midnight Clock, if you have Lotus Petal in your graveyard. That's the main reason it's here, honestly. How sad is that? But basically, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, so it's a 1/2 for 1. And when it enters the battlefield, you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. Honestly, kind of wish it didn't do that, but who cares? And then you can tap and choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. This is great. People are going to remove some of our artifacts, and I mean, some of them remove themselves anyway, just like Lotus Petal, so... just another way to ramp actually on a creature, really underutilizing how broken this card is, but we won't talk about that too much. Now, what's some other just random stuff we got to talk about? Well, I mean, Mishra's Bauble is just a 0-drop that will just kind of smooth out our game as well as really get us ramping off to the races, which is what we're trying to do with this deck. Ghostly Flicker is kind of an interesting one that could maybe save some of our creatures or even our artifacts from removal, as well as really do some wacky stuff if we've got a Gilded Lotus on the battlefield. Just give us some extra mana, especially with those cost reducers that we might also have out. Works great. And then we've also got Mirage Mirror, which is just one of my favorite artifacts overall. We could totally just steal somebody else's cooler artifact that they're playing. I don't know who's going to be playing any cooler artifacts than us. We're basically doing all the best ones, but we could also turn it into, I don't know, another Phyrexia dude, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's got an excellent ability. I should probably read it. Mirage Mirror is a 3-mana artifact with an ability for pay 2 generic. Mirage Mirror becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, enchantment, or land until end of turn. That's a lot of things. This can be whatever you want. I don't know why you never include it. It's like you have every card in your deck. It's pretty sweet. And then similar but not the same to that is Sculpting Steel. You may have Sculpting Steel enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. That's usually just going to be a Gilded Lotus, or sometimes it's even going to be a Covetous Jewel, which is pretty nasty. Nobody likes to be sitting across from that, but you do it anyway. But hey, you never know. Maybe they've got a plan to steal it. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope we just win right there. You never know. But then I think my favorite, absolute favorite little niche kind of special pick for this deck is going to be Perplex, which is 1 blue-black, counter target spell unless its controller discards his or her hand, but more importantly, it has Transmute for 1 blue-black, which is discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it and put it into your hand, and you can then shuffle your library, and you can only do this as a sorcery. Now basically this gets either half of Narset or Windfall. Maybe you've already got your Notion Thief on the battlefield and you just need the Windfall. This can search up the Mirage Mirror, the Sculpting Steel. This can search up most of the things in this deck. It could even get Stoic Rebuttal if you just don't want to, you know, they're going to discard their hand. Who cares? Maybe it's their only spell, but you want to counter something anyway. Seems like kind of a waste, but you could totally do it. It could even get Bontu's Last Reckoning for you. It just gets so many pieces of this deck, really kind of weaves it all together, and I've had a lot of fun casting that many times. Very underplayed card. And that's basically the deck tech. So the plan with this deck is to just play a ton of artifacts, ramp way faster than anyone else, and then reset everybody's lands back to 0, leaving us with more mana than the rest of them. Then we're basically just going to tick up Tezzeret until everybody's dead. You never know, we might even swing in with some creatures if our opponents are really doing that poorly. I can't recommend building this deck, I can't recommend playing it, but I've had a ton of fun doing both of those things, so there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and look forward to an update on how I decide to dismantle this deck and make something better with it. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for all your likes, all your comments, subscriptions, all that. I really appreciate it. If you want even more Oathbreaker content on another channel, myself and one of my new friends have started an Oathbreaker podcast that goes up every week, every Saturday, hopefully. We've got a couple episodes on already, and there's a lot more to come on the way, so if you're interested in that, go check it out. I'll throw it up on screen, hopefully, and put a link in the description. I hope to see you there. Thanks again.